There's something nobody tells you about civilizations. They don't just fall. They collapse in almost the exact same way. Every single time. Rome, the Maya, Easter Island, Mesopotamia, the Khmer Empire, different continents, different centuries, different gods, different languages. But the pattern? Identical. Most people think it's about war, or drought, or invasion, or corrupt leaders. They look at the ruins and say, well, they got unlucky. They blame individuals, blame circumstances, blame fate. Right, wrong, because Carl Sagan saw something else, something most historians miss completely. He looked at the collapse of civilizations the way a physicist looks at a falling bridge, not as a tragedy, not as a mystery, as a system reaching its breaking point. And what he found should terrify you, because we're not special, we're not immune, and the clock is ticking faster than you think. Here's what happens to every civilization that's ever existed. First, they solve a problem, a fundamental problem that's been holding them back. They figure out how to grow more food, store more grain, irrigate dry land. Maybe they domesticate an animal, or invent a plow, or discover how to smelt metal. Suddenly, there's surplus, more food than they need to survive. And surplus changes everything. Population grows. Villages become towns. Towns become cities. Specialization begins. You don't need everyone farming anymore. So you get priests and soldiers and engineers and artists. You get pyramids and aqueducts and libraries. You get writing systems, legal codes, trade networks. You get complexity. And complexity feels like progress. It feels like enlightenment. It feels like winning. But here's the strange part. Complexity has a cost. A real, measurable, unavoidable cost. Every new layer of society requires energy to maintain. Every new technology needs resources to function. Every new level of organization demands coordination. And at first, it works beautifully. The returns are massive. You invest a little energy. You get back a lot of stability, a lot of power. Building that first irrigation canal. Game changer. Organizing that first army. Protection for everyone. Creating that first legal system. Order instead of chaos. The benefits massively outweigh the costs. But then something shifts. Slowly at first. So slowly you don't notice. The returns start to diminish. That second canal. Still helpful, but not as revolutionary as the first. That larger army. More expensive to feed. Slightly less effective per soldier. That more complex legal system. Now you need lawyers to interpret the lawyers. You need more energy to maintain what you have. More resources to keep the system from falling apart. You're not growing anymore. You're just holding on. And that's when civilizations make a fatal mistake. They double down. Think about Rome in its final centuries. The empire was massive, unprecedented, the greatest concentration of human power the world had ever seen. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. But maintaining it? Exhausting. They needed more soldiers to guard longer borders. Because every conquest created a new border that needed defending. More grain to feed more cities. More taxes to fund more bureaucracy. More gold to pay more mercenaries. And the returns kept shrinking. Every new fort cost more than it protected. Every new campaign drained more than it conquered. They weren't expanding anymore. They were hemorrhaging. And here's what nobody wants to admit. They knew. The Romans weren't stupid. They saw the cracks forming. They had historians documenting the decline as it happened. They had senators giving speeches about it. But they couldn't stop. Because stopping meant collapse. So they kept going. Kept pushing. Kept extracting. They debased their currency. Raised taxes to crushing levels. Hired foreign soldiers. Anything to keep the machine running. Until there was nothing left to extract. Until the complexity became so expensive that it cost more to maintain than it provided. And then it collapsed. Not slowly. Suddenly. Now think about what that implies. Collapse isn't caused by a single disaster. It's caused by the structure itself. By the very complexity that made the civilization great in the first place. It's like a star. A star shines because it's burning fuel. The bigger the star, the brighter it burns. But the brighter it burns, the faster it runs out. A star like our sun will burn for 10 billion years. A massive star? Maybe 10 million. And when it runs out, collapse. Every time. The laws of physics don't care about the star's history or achievements. They just care about the math. And civilizations follow the same pattern. Carl Sagan understood this in his bones. He spent his life studying planets, stars, the evolution of worlds. He looked at Venus and saw a runaway greenhouse effect. He looked at Mars and saw a world that lost its atmosphere. He looked at Earth and saw something precious, fragile, and he saw the same pattern everywhere. Complexity requires energy. Energy runs out. Systems collapse. It's not a moral failure. It's thermodynamics. But it goes deeper than that. Because humans have a unique problem. We're the only species that can see the collapse coming and still refuse to change course. Sagan called it the burden of intelligence. We're smart enough to build incredible things, but not wise enough to know when to stop. The Maya had cities that rivaled anything in Europe. They had agriculture, astronomy, mathematics. They knew their population was outgrowing their water supply. They knew the droughts were getting worse. And they kept building temples anyway. Bigger ones, taller ones. Because that's what civilizations do when they feel threatened. They double down on what made them successful. They worship growth, even when they know better. And here's where it becomes unforgettable. Sagan realized we're doing it again. Right now, we've built a global civilization more complex than anything in human history. 8 billion people, interlocking economies, technology everywhere, supply chains so long that no single person understands them, financial systems so abstract that money has become a shared hallucination, energy grids burning fuel extracted from the ancient past. It's incredible. It's also incredibly fragile. We depend on systems we barely understand. Food that travels thousands of miles from farm to table. One disruption and the shelves go empty. Energy from finite sources buried deep in the earth. A climate system we've destabilized in the blink of an eye. And the returns are diminishing. Just like Rome. Just like the Maya. We're working harder to maintain what we have. Burning through resources faster. Seeing the cracks form in real time. The extreme weather. The melting ice. The rising seas. But we can't stop. Because stopping feels like losing. So we double down. We innovate. We extract. We tell ourselves we're different, smarter, more advanced. We have technology the Romans couldn't dream of. Right? Maybe. But here's the thing about technology. It doesn't change the laws of physics. It doesn't make energy infinite. It just makes us better at using what we have. And when what we have runs out, same result. Every time. Think about your own life. You wake up in a climate-controlled room. You flip a switch and light floods in. You turn a tap and clean water flows. You open a refrigerator stocked with food from dozens of countries. You assume tomorrow will be like today, that the grocery store will have food, that the lights will turn on, that the water will run. And most of the time, it does. But that assumption is built on a system so complex that almost no one understands all of it. The energy grid, the supply chain, the financial networks, they work until they don't. And when they don't fail gradually. They collapse suddenly. Because that's how complex systems work. They're stable until they're not. And then they flip. Suddenly. Irreversibly. Like a bridge that looks fine until one extra car drives across and the whole thing comes down. Not because that car was special, but because the structure had reached its limit. And here's the strange part. Carl Sagan saw this coming decades ago. He tried to warn us. Not with fear. With perspective. He used to say we live on a pale blue dot. A tiny speck suspended in a sunbeam. The only home we've ever known. Every human who ever lived there. Every civilization that ever rose there. And every civilization that ever fell there too. Not because they were weak, but because they forgot something fundamental. They forgot they were part of a system, a finite system with limits. And you can't negotiate with limits. You can't innovate your way past the laws of thermodynamics. You can't tweet your way out of ecological collapse. The universe doesn't care about your GDP growth. It just cares about the math. Energy in, energy out, entropy increasing, and when the energy runs out, collapse. But you can choose. You can choose to simplify before you're forced to. You can choose to use less before there's nothing left. You can choose sustainability over growth. You can choose humility over hubris. And that's where it connects to the stars. Because we're made of star stuff. Sagan's most famous phrase. And it's not just poetry. It's literal truth. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a dying star. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen you breathe, all created in stellar furnaces billions of years ago, then scattered when those stars exploded, then gathered into clouds, then collapsed into our solar system, then assembled into Earth, then organized into life, then evolved into you. You're not separate from the universe. You're a way the universe experiences itself. And civilizations? They're experiments in complexity. Some succeed for a while. Most fail. But the pattern teaches us something. Growth for its own sake is a trap. Bigger isn't always better. Sometimes the wisest thing a civilization can do is stop, is say, this is enough. Is choose quality over quantity. Is choose meaning over expansion. Sagan wasn't a pessimist. He believed in human potential. He believed we could be the first civilization to see the pattern and break it. To choose sustainability over expansion. To choose wisdom over cleverness. But he also knew it would be hard, because it requires restraint. It requires admitting we're not as special as we think, that we're subject to the same forces as every empire before us. And that's a hard truth to swallow, especially when everything around you screams grow, build, consume. But the alternative? The alternative is written in the ruins of every civilization that ignored the warning. So what do? Do we accept collapse as inevitable? Do we give up? No, because here's what makes us different. We know. The Romans didn't understand thermodynamics. The Maya didn't have global communication. But we do. We can see the whole system. We can measure the carbon, track the temperature, model the outcomes. We have the knowledge. The question is whether we have the wisdom, whether we can look at the pattern and say, not us, not this time. Whether we can choose a different path, not infinite growth on a finite planet, but balanced prosperity. Not domination of nature, but harmony with it. Not complexity for its own sake, but simplicity with purpose. It sounds impossible. Maybe it is. But Sagan believed in one thing above all else, that the cosmos is knowable, that we can understand our place in it. And that understanding changes everything. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you know why civilizations collapse, you carry that knowledge, not just to survive, but to be worthy of surviving, to be the civilization that learned, that adapted, that chose the stars over the ruins. And maybe that's the real test. Not whether we can build higher or grow faster, but whether we can look at the universe, vast, ancient, indifferent, and say, we're small, we're fragile, we're temporary. But we're also aware. And awareness is a form of magic. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to us, but it does. It follows laws we can discover, patterns we can recognize, and it's showing us the pattern right now, in real time. The question is whether we'll listen, whether we'll heed the warning, or whether we'll become just another layer in the fossil record, another cautionary tale for whatever comes next. Carl Sagan's warning was real. It wasn't metaphor. It was physics. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I don't know the answer. Nobody does. But I know this. The pattern is real. The physics is clear. The choice is ours. And the clock is ticking. I'll leave you with that. Real talk. On a scale of 1 to 10. How much hope do you have that humanity will actually choose differently this time? Drop your number in the comments and explain why. No wrong answers. And if this video made you think, don't keep it to yourself, share it. Sometimes awareness is the first step to change.